this episode or this recording is just going to be a quick reflection on Lacan's formula of sexuation and Carl Jung's marriage as a psychological relationship. It's one of his chapters or essays, however we want to consider it. Something that really got me thinking was, and by the way, this recording, I'm not gonna do what I usually do to kind of help people understand the concepts that I'm talking about, because this is just meant to be a quick reflection, doing a comparison with Jung and Lacan, because now that I'm starting to understand Lacan a little bit more, I'm starting to actually make sense of what Jung is actually saying. And I feel like Jung was actually, when Jung would talk about men having a sort of feminine inside them, right? This feminine, it really rings true when we look at Lacan's formula of sexuation, where men, or the masculine, has this masculine ideal, but in reality it's just a facade to hide the castration. That's why it's called imposture. Men are at the imposture of the castration. They have refused the castration. And understanding this refusal of the castration makes me now understand why Jung always talked about how men need to integrate the feminine inside of them. And just to read a couple lines from Jung in the title Marriage as a Psychological Relationship, Jung says here, every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, not the image of this or that particular woman, but a definite feminine image. And here he says, even if no women existed, it would still be possible at any given time to deduce from this unconscious image exactly how a woman would have to be constituted psychically. The same is true of woman. She too has her inborn image of man. Actually, we know from experience that it would be more accurate to describe it as an image of men, whereas in the case of man, it is rather the image of woman. So it's really crazy, because I feel like Carl Jung does the inverse of Lacan when he says that, when Lacan says that all men, basically all the masculine is closed, right? All men is closed, meaning that there is an ideal, right? It's closed because there is an ideal, non-castration, masculine ideal image, so to speak, right? It's closed, right? But this refusal to accept the castration is, I think, what Jung would say, the eternal feminine image in man, right? Which Lacan already observed, right? That it is the castration, right? Because the woman, for Lacan, accepts the castration. Men don't. And I feel like Jung, when he says that man has an eternal image of the woman, it's just one woman. This one woman represents the refusal to accept the castration. And I think that's why Jung talks about trying to integrate or having a dialogue with this actual image, this eternal image of the woman, with the one that accepts the castration, right? To kind of put it in more Lacan's terms, right? The one that accepts the castration, right? We have the eternal image of castration, right? And now, because now I'm connecting the dots. It seems, at least it feels like I'm connecting some dots with Jung and Lacan, but I don't really feel like Jung explains it as well as maybe Lacan does. I mean, I'm not really sure. But then when Jung says that for women, or they have a inborn image of men. It's not just one man, it's men. That's really interesting, because when we talk about Lacan's formula for the feminine, where the feminine isn't closed, right? It's not an all that is closed. It's an all that is open, right? So let's put it this way: it's an open to all. And if we were to connect to Jung's notion of the image that is in the feminine, or in woman, that it's not actually an image of man, but it's an image of men, right? So he's actually talking about that there is this vast openness going on, because clearly, it can't be singular. It has to be multiple, right, in order to be open to all. And it starts to kind of click in my mind now, because when Lacan talks about how women have the feminine, oh man, I've been doing the greatest sin here, conflating women and feminine. Okay, so I will just do a correction. Everything I've been saying, I mean masculine or feminine, but Jung sometimes doesn't do that. So he might conflate the two. I think if I were to correct Jung, I wouldn't say men have an eternal image of woman. I would say the masculine has an eternal image of the feminine. And yeah, that would be a better way to put it. But anyways, what I was going to say is that for Jung, this eternal image of men for the feminine, when Lacan says that the feminine is split, right? It's closed. I mean, it's open, but it's split, meaning that there is no one ideal. And Todd McGowen does a really good example of talking about there's the split, meaning he'll do like the Virgin Mary as an example of one of the ideals. And then there's Marilyn Monroe as the other ideal, which is to be like a sex object, right? So there's the sex object, and then there's the Virgin Mary, and that the feminine is split between these ideals, right? There's just no one ideal. So it's not closed, it's open. It's open to all. Let's put it that way. And it makes sense now when we use Jung to explain this, because the feminine would have the eternal image of men, which if you were to cater to men, it would make sense that you can't have one ideal. It would make sense that it has to be open, it can't be closed, because then you wouldn't be catering to the masculine, right? You wouldn't be able to. It would be impossible for it to be closed, right? It would have to be open. And so I think that's what shows that, reveals that issue there, because it is open. And that when Jung talks about the feminine, even though he says woman here, I'm just kind of keeping it in check, that the feminine has the eternal image of men, which actually I wouldn't change that line. I wouldn't say masculine, because I would definitely want to say men, just to kind of incorporate the plural of masculine if I could, because I wouldn't want that to be just a singular notion. Even though masculine is meant to be more universal, not tied to biological, I understand that, but the reason for me saying the men would really show that, the emphasize that it's multiple, right? And when you have the image of the multiple, you can't be closed, you have to be open. So that means it ironically, it splits like a group, right? Like if you cater to a group in a party, there's always groups that split and form smaller groups, the ones that get along with each other, and so on. To really give a current contemporary example of this split ideals, right, is for example, even if we want to look at the take on sexual workers and people that don't do sexual work, right? Or maybe only people that do OnlyFans and the people that don't do OnlyFans, and how there's judgment on both sides of this, right? There's critiques on both sides. And so this feminine ideal is very much split, right? Like you could say the Marilyn Monroe manifestation is this notion of the increasing OnlyFans and the different forms of sex work that has taken place in society. It really hasn't changed. I would say Lacan is definitely correct in this. Like, it hasn't changed. These ideals haven't changed. And it's interesting that McGowen used Marilyn Monroe and Virgin Mary as the split ideals, because if you think about it, both of those ideals they don't cater to just one. They cater to all. They cater to all, right? Marilyn Monroe was an object for all men. Object of desire for all men. The Virgin Mary, right, the one who cares and kind of takes care of, like this would be, I'm sort of, in my opinion, this is kind of like I would rather put it as like a mother, right? I'd rather use like a mother ideal. Like, but actually, you know what? The Virgin Mary is a mother, actually, right? So if we use the notion of the mother, right, where it's like, she doesn't just take care of the husband, she takes care of everybody else in the household, right? She caters to them with loving care, and it's not just one person. It's never just one person, right? It's always to all. So she can't be closed. She can't be closed, right? She has to give love and attention to her kids, and she has to give love and attention to her husband. So this would show the split ideals here, where the women are they're always open, and there isn't one ideal to close them. There isn't one ideal or one feminine ideal to close them off. Which the problem, I would say, isn't necessarily the women. it's the fact that men don't accept the castration because women accept the castration. And I think that's why Jung notices that women can have a problem or kind of have neuroses with these split ideals, right? If we look at Lacan's split feminine ideals, that women would have to sort of recognize, because I think Jung noticed that women would have a problem with this. I'm not really sure if Lacan would say this or recognize this in a sense, but I think he probably did. I haven't read. I'm not well read in Lacan, so I'm not gonna say anything more. But I have a feeling he probably did address that there is probably repercussions, but I'm pretty sure the way he framed it would be the repercussions of the man not accepting the castration. That's just my feeling of it. But Carl Jung, I think the important part is what Carl Jung is advocating for is that the masculine has to come to terms with the castration, right? The castration, or at least have a dialogue with the castration. And this would be like Jung's version of integration, basically, though I might be completely slaughtering it because Jung always advanced for this whole. But I like to look at Jung's wholeness as like absolute knowledge, except from a personality level. From the level of what he deems as the self. Because everything's about personality for Carl Jung. And sort of like incorporating that personality. But okay, so this didn't turn out to be a quick note, but anyways, I think the dialogue the woman or the feminine would need to have, I guess if we're kind of combining Jung with Lacan, would probably be that they have to have a dialogue with the people, with the closed group, right? The all men, which would be the eternal image in the feminine. They have to have a dialogue with the all men, the one that refuse the castration, the one that can't accept the castration. And so in this sense, once the dialogue takes place, we can go from desire to drive. And I want to say that is what integration means. Really, if I were to put a Jungian twist on it, that's what attempting to integrate means. This attempt to integrate goes from you are bypassing desire and going into drive, where you continue the dialectical process with your counter, the feminine, masculine. It doesn't have to be, but I'm kind of restricting the desire to the feminine and the masculine here. But that would be an example, I think, if we do a sort of combination of Jung and Lacan, where integration would actually be having this dialectical process of bypassing desire and then turning it into drive, right? Drive meaning it would be the dialectical process, which is, in my opinion, when Jung advocates for this attempt to integrate your anima animus, right? This attempt, which is funny because Jung, just to bring, oh my goodness, this is totally not long, which is funny because Jung says that you can't integrate the anima animus, and I think that, because it's impossible to. And I think Lacan would agree, because that would be the real. It's impossible. But what you can do, this is what Jung says, you can integrate the content. And I know I'm going to be doing a sin here, but the content would be like the imagination in some sense, from Lacan's. Right? Because the form, the form cannot be integrated. That's what Jung would say. And the form is the animus for Jung anyways. But it's the impossibility of integrating this form that is the real. But the content you can integrate for Jung, right? The content you can. So basically, the content from the symbolic order, again, I'm doing this in here, but just to kind of make sense, this is the first time I'm doing a Lacan-Jung connection, and it's really difficult, so forgive me. I'm still learning the imaginary, and I know it's more nuanced than all that. Like, the way I explain it is really the fact, it really isn't true to the whole thing, because Lacan's imaginary, symbolic, real, they all like function like simultaneously. Isn't it something that just like, all right, we go from the imaginary, then we go to symbolic, then we go to real, then we go to imaginary again? No, it's not like that. And I think the people that listen already know this, so again, this was just meant to be a quick reflection, but I think I got that point across. I think I got the point, right? Even if I'm explaining it a little bit poorly, I think people might still get the sense of what I'm trying to say here. But anyways, this obviously didn't turn out to be a quick reflection, but take care, guys.